Midwinter 878. A Viking army storms a royal hall. The attack comes without warning during a Christmas feast. The king barely escapes with his life. He flees into a freezing, muddy swamp. Behind him, his kingdom is falling apart. Every other English kingdom has already fallen. The Vikings believe this war is already won. They think they picked an easy Christian king. They are about to learn how wrong they were. This is the story of Alfred the Great. Decades earlier, Viking raiders began striking England's coast. At first, they came only to plunder and leave. Monasteries were easy, undefended targets for early raiders. By the 860s, everything about their strategy changed. A massive force, later called the Great Heathen Army, arrived. This time, they came to conquer land outright. They wanted crowns, farmland, and permanent settlements, not just gold. One by one, English kingdoms began to fall. Northumbria collapsed under Viking pressure fairly quickly. East Anglia soon followed, its king brutally killed. Mercia crumbled next, unable to resist any longer. Only one kingdom still stood against them, Wessex. Alfred was not raised expecting to become king. He was the youngest of 4 royal brothers. Each brother ruled Wessex before him in turn. As a boy, he reportedly loved books and learning. Few expected the throne would ever pass to him. Alfred spent his early years fighting alongside them. He watched them struggle against endless Viking incursions. In 871, his brother Ethelred died from battle wounds. Alfred, still young, suddenly inherited a war-torn kingdom. He became king with Vikings already inside Wessex. His first years on the throne were brutal. Alfred fought battle after battle without decisive success. At times, he paid the Vikings to leave temporarily. This tactic, later called Danegeld, bought him time. It did not buy him lasting peace or safety. The Danish leader Guthrum kept returning again and again. Each retreat was simply a pause before another invasion. Wessex grew exhausted, but Alfred refused to surrender completely. Then came the winter of 878, and disaster struck. Guthrum launched a surprise attack during the Christmas season. He targeted Alfred's royal estate at Chippenham directly. Most of the Wessex court was celebrating, unprepared for war. The assault was swift, brutal, and almost completely successful. Alfred barely escaped with only a small band. Nearly everyone else was killed, captured, or scattered. For a moment, English independence seemed completely finished. Alfred fled southwest into the Somerset marshes. He found refuge on a small island called Athelney. Thick mud and dense reeds protected it from attack. From the outside, Alfred looked utterly defeated and powerless. According to legend, he once hid inside a peasant's hut. The woman did not recognize her exhausted hidden guest. She asked him to watch her baking cakes. Distracted by his kingdom's troubles, Alfred let them burn. She scolded him harshly, unaware he was her king. Historians debate whether this story is truly accurate. Still, the story captures how far Alfred had fallen, a king reduced to failing at the simplest task. But Athelney was never truly a surrender. It became Alfred's secret base for open resistance. He gathered loyal men willing to fight in secret. From the marshes, they launched sudden guerrilla raids. They struck Viking patrols, then vanished back into the swamp. They disrupted supply lines, feeding Guthrum's occupying forces. They ambushed collaborators who had sided with the invaders. Every raid reminded Wessex that their king still lived. Every raid told the Vikings this fight was not over. Slowly, quietly, Alfred rebuilt both morale and momentum. Meanwhile, a second Viking force tried closing the trap. Ubba, a feared Viking commander, landed near Devon. He arrived with dozens of ships and hardened warriors. He hoped to crush Alfred from another direction entirely. Local defenders met him at a place called Sinwit. They killed Ubba and shattered his invading army completely. A famous Viking banner was captured during that fight. This victory gave Alfred crucial breathing room to plan. It also proved that Vikings could still be beaten. By spring, Alfred judged the moment had finally come. He sent word to loyal men across 3 counties. Slowly, fighters from Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire gathered. They met him at a landmark called Egbert's Stone. contemporary accounts describe genuine joy at seeing him alive. Many had assumed their king was dead or fled abroad. Instead, here he stood, ready to fight for West Wessex. Alfred's gathered army marched steadily toward Guthrum's position. They camped one night near a place called Ely Oak. At dawn, they continued marching toward the Vikings directly. They found Guthrum's forces holding high ground near Edington. Neither side could avoid what was coming next. This single battle would decide England's entire future. The armies clashed in a brutal day-long struggle. Shield walls crashed together again and again without pause. Neither side gave ground easily during the early fighting. Men fell by the hundreds on both sides. Slowly, though, Alfred's disciplined line began pushing forward. The Viking formation started wavering under sustained, relentless pressure. Eventually, their shield wall broke apart completely. Guthrum's warriors scattered, fleeing back toward their stronghold. Alfred's forces cut down many during that desperate retreat. Alfred did not simply celebrate and withdraw afterward. He pursued the fleeing Vikings straight to Chippenham. There, he surrounded Guthrum's remaining forces completely. For 2 full weeks, Alfred's men held the siege firm. No food or reinforcements could reach the trapped defenders. Inside the walls, Guthrum's men slowly ran out of food. Eventually, starving and trapped, Guthrum asked for peace. The terms Alfred demanded were unusually strict for the era. Guthrum would leave Wessex and never return. He would also accept baptism into the Christian faith. This was not simply about religion or symbolism alone. It was meant to bind Guthrum through sacred, unbreakable oath. In that era, broken baptismal vows carried serious spiritual weight. 3 weeks later, Guthrum arrived at a church near Athelney. There, he renounced his old Norse gods completely. He accepted Christianity, taking the new name Aethelstan. Alfred himself stood as his sponsor and godfather. 2 former enemies were now bound as spiritual kin. Afterward, both leaders traveled together to a place called Wedmore. There, they negotiated the borders of a lasting peace. Guthrum received East Anglia and land further north. Alfred retained Wessex and much of southern England. This boundary later became known as the Danelaw line. For roughly 10 years, this treaty largely held firm. The Vikings had expected to erase Wessex entirely. Instead, they created England's most legendary defensive king. Alfred used the peace to rebuild his shattered kingdom. He constructed fortified towns called burhs across his territory. These forts made future Viking raids far more costly. He reorganized his military into a rotating defense force. This ensured soldiers were always available without exhausting farmland. He also promoted learning, translating important texts into English. He believed a strong kingdom needed educated leaders, not just soldiers. Few other Anglo-Saxon kings left behind such a legacy. Alfred is still the only English king called the Great. Historians credit him with saving Anglo-Saxon culture from extinction. Without Edington, England as an idea might have vanished. Guthrum and his Vikings believed Wessex was already finished. They believed its king was too weak to matter. Instead, that same king rebuilt an entire nation. The Vikings had picked the wrong Christian king to underestimate.